lives in Chicago. All right, you want to?
There we go. Yep.
Start?
Let me give you the intro you deserve, Colleen. My co-host with over 4 decades in the game, an assistant for 2 national championship teams, a dynamic assistant coach, and also a successful head coach, leading UC Irvine to their only NCAA tournament appearance. I thought that might change this year.
I did too.
Coach USA basketball, professional basketball with the Sparks, worked in administration at UCLA as assistant athletic director, and served as secretariat for competition for women's basketball for the '84 Olympics. And then, of course, my favorite accomplishment, the technical advisor and consultant for the classic film Love and Basketball, our resident legend, their snack and music expert, Colleen Matsuhara.
Thank you, Matthew. And for those of you who are new, I do a little bit of this and that. And so I start off giving some musical tips. I'm a huge music collector. I have all kinds of CDs. I probably have 1,000 CDs of different genres. So I put together a little music list. I'm just going to give you a little trailer. So just bear with me with my music, okay? And so I'm going to tell you who these people are. Okay, the first musician here, the song is called Rotate, and it's by a musical artist, Afrobeat artist. His name is Burna Boy. Okay, I put Rotate on because they talk about the championship section, and we just all came back from watching the championship. Okay, my next song is by an artist named Toby Wigwe. He's an Igbo fellow that lives in Houston, Texas. And the name of this song is Against the Grain or Shine. It's a medley. And okay, as coaches, you're all made to shine, whether you're helping your student athletes or your school as a whole, your community. So that's why I chose that song. And then my third selection is by a well-known artist, Mary J. Blige. And this one here is Good Morning Gorgeous. And it's really a song that displays self-love for herself. You know, she's had, some ups and downs in her career. So here we go. So remember that. Wake up in the morning and look at yourself and say, good morning, gorgeous. Good morning, handsome. Okay, so that's my musical tips. Now for my snacks. I'm a huge snacker. And in fact, just today before the session, when my teeth fell out, my filling. So I got to go see my dentist. Okay, so my snacks for today. First, let me start off with this one. I'm a huge customer of Trader Joe's. So these here are Trader Joe's sour cream and onion flavored rings. They're lentil and rice snacks. They're baked, gluten-free, and they're delicious. I've already poured myself a bowl. In case my screen goes black, it's because I'm eating them, okay? They're just these little baked onion rings. And let me tell you, if I start eating it, I'll eat the whole bag. And they're also good dipped in ranch dressing, okay? So those are snack number 1. Snack number 2 is Lee Hing sour watermelon gummies. Now, my nephew works in Hawaii. He came home to visit, so he brought me these. These are sour watermelon. And just thinking of it, I could already feel my cheeks reacting to the sour watermelons, but these are them. These probably also help take out my feeling, okay? Then my third snack I'm going to have later, but I got hooked on these during March Madness. Every time I'd watch a game, I'd lay on the couch and I'd watch a game. And these are just Sea Sucker from See's Candies. Chocolate is this flavor, but tonight, is also This Is Us. So never call me during This Is Us on Tuesdays, anybody. So my snack for tonight is butterscotch, just 90 calories, and it lasts a long time. So that saves me some more calories, but those are 3 of my more favorite snacks, okay? So anybody has any questions about those, but those are See's lollipops. They come in all different flavors, butterscotch, vanilla, orange cream, but butterscotch and chocolate are my favorites. And I ate many of those during watching all the March Madness. Okay, next, I also give a little lesson on women's basketball history, since we're all into women's basketball today. I might have mentioned this player before, but Lucia Harris, who was the center at Delta State University. In 1955, she was born in a small town in Mississippi, Minter City, Mississippi. She was a 10th of 11 children. Her parents were sharecroppers. She was very soft-spoken, but at 6'3", she was a great post player. She went to Delta State. And in the 1970s, Delta State was a 3-time national champion. And she averaged 25.9 points, 14.4 rebounds. And she played 30 years before there was a WNBA. And I was able to see her play in two of those championship games. They unseated Immaculata College in 1976 at the first Women's Basketball Olympics in Montreal. She scored the very first basket. The USA opened up against Japan. The Japanese player went down the court, shot, missed. The USA got the rebound, and Annie Myers passed the ball to Lucia, who scored the very first Olympic women's basketball basket. After college and after the Olympics, she was the first woman ever officially drafted by an NBA team in 1977. At that time, they were the New Orleans Jazz, but Lucy admits that she thought it was for a publicity stunt and she wasn't good enough. So she declined the offer. In 1992, she was the first African-American woman inducted into the Naismith Hall of Fame. Now, the reason why I'm just telling you a little bit about her is that she's definitely a legend from the past. Unfortunately, in January of this year, she passed away unexpectedly. And the reason why I want to honor her today is because March 27th, there was an independent filmmaker named Ben Proudfoot who made a documentary on her before she passed away, and it's called The Queen of Basketball. And this documentary won the Oscar for Best Documentary, short form. And it was just, if any of you can look it up, it's free on YouTube. It's called The Queen of Basketball. It lasts about 21 minutes. And the thing that's so special about this is that Lucy is telling her story. The camera's right up close to her, and she tells you, and she's so humble. And when the director went up there to get the Oscar, his quote was, "If there's anyone out there that still doubts whether there's an audience for female athletics, let this Academy Award be the answer." And then he said, "Long live the Queen," meaning Lucy. And he ended his remarks with, "And President Biden, bring home Brittany Griner," which is also why I'm wearing my Bring Brittany Home pin that I got at the Final Four. So that's our women's basketball history. So please, I ask all of you, it's really enjoyable. It's only a 20-minute YouTube film, okay? The Queen of Basketball. And it's really a shame that, Lucy passed away before the film came out, although she was able to view it at a film festival. And Shaquille O'Neal and Steph Curry are executive producers. And I think when Shaq saw the film, it almost made him cry, and he called her the GOAT. And then he and Steph Curry decided to be the executive producers. Steph Curry said he got on board because he wanted his two daughters to have a role model that would empower them and, really inspire and motivate them. So, it was really sad when she passed away, but just to have this documentary get the Academy Award, I think it's just fabulous. So anyway, then I will turn over to Matthew, but the reason why we call this the Growth Mindset Coaches Zoom is because people that have a growth mindset, it's a term that a psychologist at Stanford, Carol Dweck, came up with. But individuals who believe their talents can be developed through hard work, good strategies, input from others, each of them has a growth mindset. This is because they worry less about looking smart and they put more energy into learning. If you all have a growth mindset, people believe that their most basic abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work, like exercising a muscle. So brains and talent are just a starting point. And this, if you have a growth mindset view, it creates a love of learning and a resilience that is essential for great accomplishments. As opposed to fixed mindset people believe that their basic qualities, like their intelligence or talents, are simply fixed traits. They spend their time documenting their intelligence or talent instead of developing them. They also mistakenly believe that their talent alone creates success without effort. So I know all of us here on this Zoom have growth mindset capabilities and mindsets. So that's what makes all of you so special. And Matthew, take it away.
Thank you, Colleen. Fantastic as usual. And I think we all have homework now to watch that documentary. That's fantastic. I can't believe I haven't seen that yet, but
I've
that
watched it three
your,
times. Yeah.
your history lessons are always spot on and just really great. Every single session, hearing wonderful stories, and I can't thank you enough. Really, really appreciate it. Coaches, it's my honor now to welcome our speaker today. He's coached with NBA Europe. He was the Elite Academy Belgium technical director. He's worked NBA player camps, and he's the architect of the BDT offense. You all know Chris Oliver, who was a guest on this same Zoom some time back. Alex Sarama, welcome. Alex works with Chris Oliver with Basketball Immersion, and also Alex, tell us about. I think you're in Europe at the time, at the moment, right?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on, Matthew. I'm based in Italy, so I'm the head coach of an academy there. I have 16 to 20-year-old boys who I work with primarily. You know, a lot of them play on national teams, etc. in Europe, but I'm from the UK originally.
Got you. Welcome. Well, thank you so much for sending the links. I don't know, coaches, if you had a chance to go through Alex's links, but there were a few questions that he wanted us each to answer about our own offense, and then there were some links that he sent that kind of go through his teachings. And Alex, I'm going to just toss it over to you, and I'll let you prompt the coaches for any answers or interaction that you like, and then maybe at the end we'll do a little Q&A.
Sounds perfect. That's great. I'm going to try and just share my screen now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Good. Okay, so excited tonight, everyone, just to be presenting on conceptual offense. And if you did have a chance to, you know, check out any of the resources I shared yesterday and just do the reflective questions, that's great. No problem if you didn't. So I'd just like you just to spend maybe 20, 30 seconds having a look at these 4 terms here. And if you feel comfortable, feel free to share your ideas just in the Zoom chat as to what any of, if you think you know like the exact definition for any of these. And if you don't, no problem at all, because this is really what we're going to be getting to in the clinic. And I loved what Colleen said about growth mindset. That's been one of the biggest things which has inspired me since I read Dweck's book. And I think it's something really pertinent to us all as coaches. So essentially what we're going to get through over the next 40 minutes or so is these 3 things. So we're going to start by looking at something called the constraint-led approach. And this is a whole theoretical framework for how we view sport coaching, and especially applied in the context of basketball. And this is all based on all the evidence we now have in the world of skill acquisition based on how people learn best and how they can acquire new motor skills and apply it, obviously, within sport. We're then going to look at what a basketball game model is, specifically, obviously, offense, and look at how we can teach and install an offense based on the science of skill acquisition and really accelerate the learning process for our players. Now, the first part of this, I'm going to get through the science very quickly. And these words look very long. And unfortunately, I did not invent them. They come from the researchers in motor science. And some of these terms have existed several decades. But they're really, really, really important to try and understand because it makes us understand how human movement happens and what skill actually is. So essentially, what we can see here is ecological dynamics is the framework for how I approach basketball coaching. And essentially, it comes from 2 ideas, dynamic system theory and ecological psychology. Many of these ideas started in the 1960s, and they've been, existed for several decades, but it's only now that we're beginning to apply these in the world of sport. And obviously, basketball is very new. This is a lot of the work that Chris Oliver and I are sharing with Basketball Immersion, really helping coaches at all levels implement the evidence base into how we coach. So I'm going to explain what this is. Dynamic system theory is essentially the idea that human movement behaviors are self-organizing. So what I mean by that is, as human beings, any action in the basketball game, it's not a case of us in our brains being like computers and bringing out stored movements and patterns that we have in all the actions we see in the basketball game. So say, for instance, we're handling the ball in a pick and roll, shooting the ball. There's no such thing as muscle memory and us having stored motor programs. So the idea is that basically we see everything that is happening in front of us. And then our brain, we respond to self-organize and move our body to solve the task at hand. And the whole idea with this is that self-organization can occur even in babies. And it's the idea that humans and basketball players, they don't need to be taught something explicitly before they can perform that kind of skill in a game. So they don't have to be shown something 1-on-0 before they can actually do it in a game. Ecological psychology, moving to the second part of this, it's basically the most important thing here is perception and action coupling. And this is really key. So everything that happens in basketball, a player perceives and they take in information in their environment. So they look at things like the spacing, the presence of teammates, where the defense are, and then they come up with a movement solution to act based on what they've just perceived. And this is where obviously decision making and things like this come into play. And that always precedes any type of technical solution. And a key word here is an affordance. So an affordance is simply an opportunity for action. And I'm going to use that word quite a bit today in the presentation, but I just want to show, before we come back to this, I want to put this in a context example so that we can really, really see this. So obviously I've got a page, a photo here of Paige shooting the ball. And I think this is traditionally how we, 99% currently how we approach coaching. And this would be very kind of a real focus on the biomechanics and the technical component of actions. So we can see here a lot of the coaching feedback on the left we would typically use. This is called internal feedback, where we're giving feedback related to body positions. And all the research shows us this type of feedback, it's actually almost impossible for athletes to implement this feedback and act upon it because of how the brain works. And this would be typically, characterized by some of the drills you can see on the right, which are very common at all levels of the game. But the reality of what happens in basketball is this, and you can see the most important thing now is the presence of a defender. And a lot of the time we miss this whole kind of aspect of the game, focusing on this, the technical component, missing all the perception, action, decisions, etc. So we're going to come back to this photo, and I just want to explain the constraint-led approach now. So the constraint-led approach is basically the key theory underpinning this. So you combine dynamic systems, ecological psychology, and now you have this, which is what a lot of sports coaches in other sports have been starting to apply. Now it's kind of just starting to come to basketball. So the constraint-led approach is basically the idea that skills in basketball happen as a result of the interaction of different constraints. So this means skills emerge within the environment. They emerge in the context of the game, okay? So few examples of individual constraints. These would be things like the size of a player, their weight, their wingspan, but it could also be things which change very quickly, such as their mood, their fatigue levels, etc. Environment would typically be things related to the playing surface, the arena, such as the temperature, the lighting, but also very critically the social cultural background of a player. So it could be maybe some things which are going on in their school life, their home life, what's their circle of friends. And then the most important constraints are task constraints. And these are essentially, we have the rules of basketball, but then all the activities you're doing in your practice, particularly in small-sided games, what are the actual rules of that game? How many offensive and defensive players are there? Is there a time limit? What's the point system? What's the aim of the game? So the idea is that all these constraints interact with perception action coupling to produce skills. So skills happen, they emerge as a result of this. This is what the constraint approach is. Now, when we look at skill, we have to understand that skill is the relationship between the player and what happens in their environment, i.e. playing an actual basketball game. And skill is not a technique, all right? And this has been a big misconception for the last 60 years in basketball. Skill is the ability for players to perceive information in their environment and act upon it as a result of the interaction of constraints. So let's go back to this right now. So obviously I've highlighted some of these individual constraints here. So let's take, let's look at this action of shooting a basketball. Well, all these constraints will lead to Paige making a decision. And I've put some different affordances that she has here at the bottom, affordance being an opportunity to action. So based on these constraints, there might be enough space and time to shoot, which is what she did here. And again, individual constraints. She was taller than the defender, bigger wingspan, and in critically task constraints, the defender was positioned to give her room to shoot. Okay, so she acted upon this affordance to shoot, but it was a decision. Okay. Other affordances here could be maybe there was a teammate who was more open, who she passed the ball to. Maybe there was a better opportunity she felt to drive it and get a rim finish. Or maybe the defense recovered to neutral on the closeout there, chest to chest, and they needed to re-trigger, i.e. they needed to run another pick and roll or something to create an advantage again. Or maybe she had the opportunity to use fakes to deceive the defense. So again, we're looking at this through the perception action coupling, looking at this from the idea of different varied affordances, all as a result of these various individual and task environmental constraints. So this basically gives us a segment to lead into all the conceptual offense stuff, which I'm getting into now. And I think the most important thing we have to remember is that basketball is a really complex system. And what I mean by that is it's very unpredictable and it's impossible to control because we just cannot predict it. The number of possibilities for different things that can happen are obviously absolutely huge. And traditionally, the approach within our sport has been to try and control it as the coaches through typically running continuity type offenses or set plays through to the end. But the reality is we need players who can thrive in the chaos and adapt and be able to act upon all the affordances that we just looked at in that instance with Paige. And instead of having, a very rigid offensive system, how can we have an offensive system which aligns with the fact that basketball is a chaotic game and it prepares players to adapt to what they see in front of them and they're basically able to react to any situation that they see. So this is where our conceptual offense comes in. And you can see here, this was on your screen. It's a photo of the Harvard attentional test where, you count the number of passes that the team in white makes. And you're so focused counting the passes that you miss the gorilla when it walks onto the screen. And this to me is a really good analogy for looking at many of the players that run set plays and continuities as they get so focused on running the pattern through to the end, they miss the advantages that are right in front of them. And there could be an easy advantage very early on within a set play, but players typically are so focused on the pattern that they miss out on it. And this is obviously what we want to try and avoid. And I think conceptual offense is a great way to develop players who can see everything that's in their environment and act on it. So what is conceptual offense and how does it compare to, rigid set plays and continuities? Well, essentially, I want to start by saying that you can still run set plays within a conceptual offense, and I'll get into that. The only difference is we would typically only run set plays on dead balls, and the rest of the time on live balls were conceptual, and I'll get into that and explain why later. But it essentially all starts with pace and space. And again, we spoke a little bit about evidence-based coaching, the idea behind the constraint-led approach and how skills happen. And kind of how can we integrate the evidence too that exists in basketball in terms of what efficient offense is? Well, that's obviously all in shot spectrum, style of play, but critically too, the highest value shots can be found in transition. And I think that's, the statistics will show you that at every level of the game. So playing with pace allows you to get those highest value shots, obviously before the defense is even set. The idea is that by playing with so much pace, if we cannot find an advantage in transition, we are immediately flowing into triggers. And these are pretty free-flowing offensive actions, such as it could be a pick and roll, a screen away, a flare screen, a get action, pistol. These triggers are basically things where players do not need to move to different locations on the floor to initiate the offense, because those typically take more time and it allows the defense to get even more set. The idea then is that players use these triggers and they have solutions based on whatever the defense does. And these are coverage solutions. So whatever defensive coverage they see, players will basically be able to apply any type of coverage solution to start an advantage immediately. And obviously this type of offense, it's completely unpredictable and it's impossible to prepare for, because any team that, maybe they try changing coverages or whatever, and again, the players have an answer for absolutely everything. And again, like I said, the dead balls is when we can run the set plays, but we emphasize within the set being creative and going off script. And I love the music Colleen did at the start of this. And the whole analogy I use here is classical versus jazz. Instead of being classical and really following the script and reading the music exactly, we want players who can play in that jazz environment. So can they go off script? And immediately early on in the set, if there's an opportunity to start an advantage, they can take it and generate that high value score. So I think looking here, and I've got some video examples, but the overriding kind of theme to a conceptual offense and where it all starts is our shot spectrum. And a lot of the things I do is try and make learning really fun for players with analogies, metaphors, etc. And what I do is I say to players, imagine you're going into the Apple store and you're going to be in the Apple store for 24 seconds. And every few seconds, the Apple Store employees are handing out iPhones. And it could be like the oldest iPhones there are, like an iPhone 3, or you could get the latest iPhone Pro Max. Now, if you end up being given the iPhone Pro Max at 21 seconds after you've been in the shop for 3 seconds, odds are that you're going to take the phone and go. All right, you've got the best model there is. Likewise, if you get given the worst iPhone model, you're probably going to stay in that Apple store a little bit longer and see what else you can get. So what am I getting at here? Well, this is our shot spectrum, of course. So obviously, some shots are just created better than others. And this is an activity I did with my team. So at the start of the year, the very first thing we did was we looked at our shot spectrum and we looked at what type of shots we want to take on offense and what we want to bait the other team into taking on defense and obviously take away. So I gave my players this. This was like an interactive task they did, and it came from them. So it wasn't me just saying, this is how it is. They had to talk through it in pairs, come up with it. And I used the analogy of a Rob shot, which is range, open, on balance. So obviously we want shots which are high value in our shot spectrum, which are Rob, range, open, on balance. And this is essentially what we came up with. So you can see what on the right of your screen towards the bottom, the shots that we're really trying to get versus the shots on the left that we're trying to avoid. And this, forms the whole basis of our conceptual offense and what we're looking for. So we're going to get into different parts of this now. And the whole idea behind the offense is not to run patterns, but to create an offensive advantage. So that could be a 2-on-1. It could be a matchup advantage. It could be creating a closeout. So these are some different types of advantage. So the idea is that we use these triggers to create advantages. And the analogy I use for this is dominoes. If you picture a set of dominoes falling, the moment we have an advantage, we want to keep the ball moving in 0 seconds until the last domino falls, which is a high value Rob shot. So the last domino to fall is essentially a Rob shot high up in our shot spectrum. So I'm just going to show some examples of some dominoes possessions with my team from this year, so you can see what this looks like in context. And we make this fun. In each country we go to for tournaments, we film a new dominoes video, which makes its way into the video edits. The moment an advantage
advantage appears, we have our rules of dominoes. We got Moses on the left right here with the 10 commandments. We've got the same for our dominoes commandments.
So essentially what you're going to see here, coaches, are whenever we have an offensive advantage, we emphasize three concepts as a team to get that rob shot. The first rule is 0 seconds. So we have to pass, shoot, or drive in 0. No holding the ball, no triple threat, etc. Because we got to keep that advantage, pass it on, and get that high value shot. Second rule, I call it one cannot guard two. So we cannot allow one defender to guard two offensive players. I think we see this in a lot of kind of older offenses. The spacing allows one defender to easily guard two offensive players. So we never want to be in a situation like that. I call it holding hands, where we're allowing one to guard two. So this applies to kind of all our ghost cuts, our drifts, our lifts, things like this, anything which basically stops that one defender guarding two. And the last rule is into space, out to space. So whenever we're in a drive and kick situation in dominoes and we kick the ball, we talk about it's like baseball. You got to sprint around the bases. And something else I do is I play with constraints in our small-sided games with the floor is lava. So if you're inside the paint off a driving kick, you got to get back outside the 3-point line within 2 seconds. So the idea is that by applying these three rules of dominoes, we can keep the dominoes falling until we get that high value shot. What we obviously want to avoid is the dominoes falling and then a stoppage in the dominoes because we break one of those three rules.
While the multiple pass dominoes possessions are the nicest to see, we could also end the dominoes after one pass. This is because dominoes ends the moment we get a rob shot. This is a shot which is range, open, and on balance. Here we see one pass creates the opportunity to drive it, ending the play with a rob shot. Dominoes are therefore not exclusively possessions with multiple passes.
Okay, so that's kind of dominoes section, really, really important. And I'm absolutely obsessive with this concept with my team because it's the moment we find that advantage, whatever we're running, whatever trigger, whatever set play is off. We're not running that anymore. We're just applying dominoes concepts. So now we're going to look at transition. And obviously, this is the easiest place to find dominoes and to generate high value shots. So it starts with a lag-free reaction. So what I mean here is every player, the moment we gain possession, all 5 players are winning their first 3 steps. There's no lag. There's no spinning wheel of death that any Mac users you may be familiar with. We're just immediately winning those 3 steps. And I call it a bolt. So we are running the floor at the speed of Usain Bolt. So no jogging. Players are in a full-out sprint in an effort to get behind a defense if we can. If we can't get behind a defense, then modern spacing, we're filling corners first. Land like a quarterback. So this is the idea with the rebounder, instead of catching the ball like traditionally facing our own baseline and pivoting, we land like a quarterback in football. So we twist in the air and we have vision of the whole floor. So this makes it much easier for us to be our own outlet because whoever rebounds the ball is going. We're not playing with a traditional point guard outlet because that just buys time for the defense to get back. Then, of course, we have the 2-side break, which I'll show in the video, where we basically look to skip the ball to the weak side to the 2-side in transition to get it started an easy domino sequence. So let's have a look at some of these concepts in this next video. So here you can see, the lag-free reaction, the ball, easy opportunities to get behind the defense. Quickest player inbounds the ball. So we do not have a designated inbounder, speeds up the rate of transition. Again, we're getting behind the defense. And that is called a clap back. When we score within 6 seconds of being scored on. Early kick aheads. Any chance we have to advance the ball early, we will take it. And obviously, it's very demoralizing for a lot of teams to play against this pace for the whole duration of a game. And you can see, you know, every shot here is a high value shot. And it's simply much easier to generate these shots in transition versus playing against a set defense in the half court. This is a two-side skip here, where we skip that ball to the two-side. I think you're going to see another really good example of the two-side skip right there. So you can see we skip it, and then we apply rules of dominoes, 0 seconds, one can't guard two. Okay, so that's our transition. And obviously, you know, a lot of these players in the clips are 16 years old. And this was the first time they kind of, this actually game here was after 3 weeks that we were together as a team. So it's not difficult to implement the stuff with the right kind of practices, small-sided games. It can be done. Now we get into our triggers. So the idea is that when we arrive, we'll arrive in offense typically with the arrival spacing. If we can't get a transition score or a two-side skip, we will arrive in 5 out. Okay, you can do this 4 out, 1 in, 2, no problem, but we're typically arriving 5 out. If we are neutral and we do not have dominoes, we are immediately running a trigger, and the players just call these out, and they're 1-syllable words. And I designate them between fast triggers and slow triggers. So a fast trigger happens if we're bringing the ball up at speed, and we immediately get into either a pick and roll, screen away, flare, or a pistol action. Okay. A slow trigger would happen if we're typically, the defense is more set and in front of us, and the handlers may be walking or jogging the ball up the floor. The game tempo is slower. Then we would get into something typically involving a 3 or 4 or 5 person action. Maybe it could be a double drag or a stagger. Okay. And the players just call these out instantly. And you know, they have a choice of triggers to use. They can run them in different locations on the floor. And then very simply, the players apply a coverage solution while using the trigger based on whatever type of defense the other team plays. We apply a coverage solution to make them wrong. So this is just a very short video showing some of the triggers you can see. And you can see here, pick and roll, touch screen, easy advantage created. Now here you can see the first few triggers are not successful, okay? We do not create an advantage. So we re-trigger. Again, we miss the advantage, so we just go into another trigger and we use a coverage solution. We flip the pick, okay? So this distorts the coverage, flip the pick, creates an advantage, we take it, okay? Again, you can see another flip there, and we pair the flip with a pop to punish the drop coverage. So again, the players are reading the defensive coverage every time. Think back to the perception and action that we spoke about at the start. Here we have a flare screen into a ghost screen. So we can mesh these triggers together, and this all happens conceptually. These are not play calls or anything. Now you can see another ghost screen, and we cut the pop to prevent one can't guard two. Here you can see a screen away or a down screen. So we have 2 triggers on both sides of the floor run simultaneously in some occasions. So essentially how I divide it up is ref touch or no ref touch. So if the ref touches the ball and there's a dead ball, that's when we run a set play. And we can run a creative set play. And the idea is that the moment the players find dominoes in the set, stop running the set. We don't want to run the set through to the end. If we're running the set play through to the last action, it means that as a team, we haven't been deceptive enough and we haven't done a good job looking for advantages earlier on. If there's no ref touch, it's all player-led calling triggers, okay? And I am now just going to show my offensive one-pager, which I shared yesterday, and just talk through that with you guys. So these are the fast triggers at the top. So we got a pick and roll, a get, two-way flare screen, zoom, pistol, all right? And these happen very quickly, very, very fast. Pick and roll and get, I call a duet. It's a 2-person trigger. Screen away, flare screen, zoom, pistol, or trios, 3-person triggers, okay? Now, again, let's take something like a pistol. We have a base version of pistol. We run our pistol as a get on the wing followed by a flare screen. But again, we encourage deceptiveness and we encourage the players to go off script. So for instance, sometimes instead of doing a get, they might go screen it and then come off the flare. Maybe the player might pass it to the get guy, fake as if they're coming to get the ball back, but instead come off the flare. Maybe we run a pick and then come off the flare. So again, we're trying to be deceptive here with our knowledge of triggers. Then we have our slow triggers, our sets on dead balls, and our rules of dominoes. So this is basically our offense on one page. So you might be wondering, like, how do we develop all of this? Well, again, this is why I did the constraint-led approach at the start. It's impossible to develop this with drills. So the alternative is using small-sided games. So pretty much everything we're doing is with defense, because without defense, there's no perception action coupling. And it's none of the kind of affordances that we see in an actual basketball game are provided by drills. So, I would do a lot of things like with the triggers where we're doing 2-on-1s, 2-on-2s, 3-on-3s, and we're changing the defense frequently. So maybe, for instance, we're doing, so let's say we're working on pick and roll, 3-on-3. The offense and the defense stay for 3 reps. So we do not rotate until we've done 3 reps. But for each rep, the defense has to use a different coverage. So maybe rep 1, they switch. The second rep, they use drop coverage. And the last rep, they do an aggressive hedge. So again, it's like creating unpredictability rather than this. So the offense has to perceive it, come up with a coverage solution. A battleship I'm going to show you now. It's a great small-sided game you can use. And with everything I do, I don't do transition drills. So instead of doing drills for a particular focus, I would just have a small-sided game and then we load in trips. So for instance, say we're doing a 3-on-3, we're playing with a pick and roll, but as soon as the defense gets the ball, it's a transition. So they get to apply their transition offense principles, while the offense has to transition to defense, apply our transition D, and then we finish with another trip coming back. It's game-like, it's unpredictable, and it allows us to really be efficient working on all phases of the game. So this is one of my most used small-sided games. This is Battleship, and I got this idea from the board game I used to play as a kid. So the idea is any trigger you use, we want to run them in different parts of the floor to be deceptive. And in Battleship, obviously, you get strikes through hitting the battleship in different locations. So for in this example, say we were doing off-ball screens, the first team to win was the team that could score running off-ball screens in 4 different locations on the floor. And we specified these. So we said trail, 2 wings, and then 1 time when the ball was starting in the post. So around a split, for instance. And you can see here, this encourages them to be really deceptive and smart, running the triggers in different parts of the floor. Now, I'm going very quickly through this. I know Matthew's recording this, so you can watch it back. I just want to give you everything I have on this topic today. So I've got a lot of in-depth resources on my YouTube channel for my team. So you can use the QR code here, and we can share the link on an email post-clinic, but all my full games and a lot of the small-sided games I use to develop this, all access practices, it's all on here. And you can see really what this looks like in context with my team. So I've got about 10 minutes, and I hope that's good for time, Matthew. I just want to get through the other things and show you coaches some more resources. So the game model is essentially, how do we play as a basketball team in 4th phase of the game? And I think for any head coach, assistant coach, any program, this is absolutely essential to have a core identity so we know exactly as a program, what are we doing? What are our concepts in these 4 phases of the game? And this comes from soccer, okay? Soccer is very far ahead of us in terms of integrating sports science and things. So I've applied all of this from soccer into basketball. So these are basically some of the things that we can use to design a game model. And obviously, the conceptual offense that we've looked at, this would be the transition offense and half-court offense stages of this. Obviously, half-court D, transition D would be, some other ideas. And, when we design our game model, these, I think, are some key characteristics that we have to have in mind. As we get into the next one, as we decide our offensive framework, it's not always a case of copy and paste. And I think, this will be different based on your context and the teams you're with. So these are the things I think you have to decide, but especially the bottom 3, these can be very individualized to your team. So for instance, the triggers that you choose could complement the players you have. And maybe you have I call it a target player, a player you really want to, involve the most in your offense, generate the most shots, etc. So maybe they're really proficient coming off ball screens. So you emphasize those. So again, it's like, this is highly customizable and adaptable. That's the beauty of this whole offensive framework. I'm just going to show coaches kind of some resources which I use to shape this. And this comes from the book, Checklist Manifesto, really excellent book. And I think as coaches, there's a lot we can implement from this into our game model concepts. So essentially, I have these documents, which I will take with me for any team I work with in my career. And it basically shows and outlines my complete vision for how I would envision my team playing in the 4 phases of the game, in our transitional, half court O, trans D, half court D. So I'm just going to walk you through very quickly some of these documents as they might help give some ideas as you approach the season. So as you start next season. So this is my game model summary. So I have everything that we're doing on one page. So, all 4 phases of the game, you can see we have it all listed here. It's just a summary. And this is for coaches. This isn't for players. So this is just to ensure the staff, we're all on the same page, not just the head coaches, the strength coaches, the physio, everyone involved in the program. So that's my, the game model summary. Then we have the team offense sheet, which we saw, and this is my coverage matrix. So, I spoke about the coverage solutions. This is a clinic in its entirety that I could do on coverage solutions. These are all the coverage solutions we use in the pick and roll. So you can see here, we've got conservative coverages in blue, aggressive coverages in like red and orange. And these are the things we can do to punish or prevent particular coverages. So punish means we accept that the defense will use their first choice coverage and we just punish it to start dominoes. Prevent is typically if we know a team is going to switch, hedge, or trap, we run actions which don't allow them to do that. So for instance, we arrive alone, the picker comes off a flare screen or a down screen before the pick. We flip the pick so they can't aggressive switch it. So this is kind of a continuum from punish to prevent. So these are all the coverage solutions that we would have within our player development and our team development. Then moving on, I have offensive and defense 1 pages. So for instance, we have here, this would be our individual offense. And typically a lot of these things would be the things that would be emphasized in player development. And within the player development, it is not 1-on-0, 2-on-0. I like putting the players together. So I would never separate guards and bigs because the whole game happens with those players interacting together. For instance, a pick and roll. So my player development, I would have a lot of the guards actually playing with the bigs. They have to learn how to play together, how to anticipate, make decisions, etc. So then, I've got a lot of our terminology on here for the defense too. A season plan, which we'll get into. So a season plan will be what are we going to do in the first few months to the season? How are we going to build this so that we have some coherency in the 4 phases of the game? Then moving on, this is kind of the master game model. And you can see this is kind of all the different parts of our offense. We've divided it. So a lot of curriculums focus only on techniques. And again, I described the constraint-led approach. Instead, I focus on the perceptual considerations and the decisions. So, we have the situations and concepts here within our dominoes. You can see, what kind of concepts I want the players to have. But then we have the key considerations. So the idea is that as coaches, we have to create situations in the practice where these things can happen. And it's not just giving them techniques, but giving them these considerations to think about. Okay. So this is kind of like the whole player dev / team development game model summary that I am using with my team. And it's useful to look at because, sometimes I have a tracker. So I see, okay, we haven't done this since for a month ago. Let's do this and see what the players can remember. So it's all systematic. Then, of course, we have a playbook. So it's not really a playbook, but I'd say more of a concept book. So it's really just to help. And I wouldn't give this to players. I would never give players a PDF playbook because it goes against all the evidence we have as to how humans learn. And they have to learn within the environment, within the practice. They're not going to learn from reading a diagram. So this is just for the coaches. So the coaches can be on completely the same page. And again, we have absolutely everything. All the conceptual offense, all the set plays, the few set plays we are running, etc. Then we have the small-sided games. So these would be all the small-sided games you're using as a coach within your program to build this game model. So what are you doing in your team practices, in your player development? So coaches get a sense for, how you're going to bring these concepts to life, what your practices are going to look like, sound like, feel like. We have a glossary, and this is something I would give to the players, getting everyone speaking the same language. So this is really important. I see a lot of programs, even with the NBA teams that we work with, immersion, coaches use different language, and everyone has to be on the same page, accelerate the learning experience. So, we have all the terminologies here, and we try and have photos which make it stick, which are catchy, using their language. Moving on, we have organizational checklists. So this is based on the book I mentioned. Everything we're going to do, from building our culture to onboarding staff to doing end of season reviews, running successful meetings, and then of course our actual style of play. How are we going to run practices? How are we going to build this game model? How are we going to run engaging video sessions, deliver successful coaching within games? All of this is on here, okay? So it allows us to really be completely integrated with everything we're doing. Then we have our player development. So we have our player development plans for the players, which are done every month, as opposed to just teaching them random techniques, doing things like cone dribbling. It's highly specific. So each player will basically we get a template like this, which I fill in for the players every month. I'm going to show you a completed one, which is, let me see if it's right here. And I change these with my staff every month. So it really allows the players to feel like they're getting something highly specific. And on these, what you'll see is that it's, we set evaluations, which are really, really clear for them. So for instance, we have the player's photo, and we have the 3 things they're working on that month. We make it really specific for them. We have their anchors, which are their biggest strengths. Then we look at their building blocks, growth areas, and what we're actually going to be doing with them that month, and how they can measure it to see if they've actually improved or whatever it is that we're setting out. So those are our player development plans. Just finishing off the documents. So we've also got, as well as our PDPs, trackers, so that as the coach with a team practice or a game, I can quickly see what everyone's focus points are, and quickly, helps me giving feedback. Practice plan templates. So how are we actually going to run the practice? Scout report, shooting challenges, everything. So you're basically thinking of absolutely everything that you need as a staff to be as organized as you can in the storm of a game, and obviously have a successful season. I also do a lot of things like these quizzes. So once we have our game model planned, I will have different quizzes based on different parts of the game model, which players will then complete. And we make these fun, interactive. Often we do them with video at the same time. So this would be my solution instead of giving them, actual playbooks. So just kind of going back, we've looked at these documents, and I think, especially for like job interviews, having this stuff is really, I don't think that, it's you're going, the extra mile. Combine all this together, and in terms of how we bring it to life, and again, this comes from soccer, sports science, tactical periodization. So the idea is that within our practices in the week, let's say we know we're playing a game on a Saturday, how we prepare for that week is all based on sports science, and it's called a morphocycle, so that we can optimize recovery and train within the 4 phase of the game. And the idea is that every part of practice links into our game model. Okay, so most of the time we're going to be training with the 4 phases of the game present. So we're not, for instance, going to do half court offense one day, transition D another, half court D another. The game happens with everything all together going on at the same time, and we want players to seamlessly transition through those different moments of the game. So essentially, tactical periodization, again, I got it from Vito Frade, a sports scientist, and Jose Mourinho used it to great success. What we see in most basketball programs is these 4 components are trained in isolation. So for instance, physical, we see conditioning, things like mile runs, running laps. Technical, we see players doing on-air drills throughout defense in a player development session. Then in their team practice, they're doing tactical stuff. and then psychological, maybe they meet a sports psychologist or whatever separately. But instead, the idea of tactical periodization is we don't want to put things in boxes. We want to train everything together. So they're doing their conditioning, instead of running laps and doing mile runs, it's carefully designed through the small-sided games and practice activities. The technical and tactical is never separated because, like I said, you can't look at these separately, because to do any act, there's perception, okay? So technical, tactical is combined. We never isolate them. Maybe we have a mindfulness coach in the actual practice making interventions. So everything is seamless. It's all one coherent kind of thing. And how we plan the week is, this is the morpho cycle. So say we're playing a game at the weekend, we know that Wednesday can be our highest. We work backwards from the game. So we know that Wednesday can be our highest intensity practice. And we're designing this so that our players can peak and be in the best shape possible and then recover, obviously, in good time after. And obviously this kind of morphocycle approach, it applies to everything in your program, not just the basketball, but what they eat. So for instance, on Wednesday, that's when they need the most calories, because they know they're going to be lifting the most on Wednesday. They're going to be practicing the most with the most intensity. So this can really change your whole program, integrating the sports science. Season plan, I'm going to skip this because we've spoken about it. Just to finish off, I think, I had to get through this pretty quickly, but I think hopefully it's just kind of intrigued some of you guys to look into this in deeper detail. And I think this is a really, really exciting time for us, because I think, there's an opportunity to be, one of the first programs, I think, in the NCAA, to actually integrate the science and bring evidence-based approaches to the forefront of what you're doing. And I think there's never been a team in the history of basketball that's really taken the science and applied it into everything they're doing from a program standpoint. And I think the results will be absolutely spectacular. The first teams that can do this and can align with the science, it will be phenomenal. And I think, it's the same, we say this with the NBA teams we're working with, it hasn't happened in the NBA yet either. So some of these evidence-based ideas, constraint-led approach, playing with conceptual offense, the tactical periodization, the game model, these are things which can give you significant advantages. For me, I look at it as the new money ball. Okay, everyone talks about money ball. Well, for me, the next money ball is this stuff: science, decision making, and actually integrating that into how we coach basketball. I want to say, obviously, I'm very grateful for you guys doing this. A lot of these ideas are very different, and I completely respect that. It's very different to what we've seen traditionally, okay, in the basketball world. And for me, for the game to keep advancing, we have to keep innovating. And I think for me, we see successful, famous coaches, even at the Final Four, who get to that level doing the same drills, running the same offenses. But, those coaches are winning not because of those drills and those offenses and those offensive systems, but in spite of them, okay? And I'm not saying that, there's some great ideas we can learn from those coaches, of course, but we have to keep using evidence and thinking, is what we are coaching, is it based on the evidence and the science that we have available? So, this is some of my contact information. I'm very reachable, and I share a lot of evidence-based material on social media, showing actually what this looks like in context, clips of my teams playing, me mic'd up in practice sessions, etc. My WhatsApp and my iMessage is there, as well as my email address. So I'd love to take questions. And of course, if you're really interested in the conceptual offense, please do check out www.conceptualoffense.com. It's kind of like, I've put on there probably about 400 videos, like the breakdown videos, the small-sided games, to teach it everything. And in season, I do have limited consulting options available. So I work with a select number of teams to actually, install these concepts. Sometimes I travel to teams and I implement this directly. So that is everything I've got today. I know I went through that very quickly, but many thanks for watching that. And obviously I will gladly take questions.
Really phenomenal stuff, Alex. Thank you. Colleen, did you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, Alex, that was awesome. Really appreciate you sharing all that. I've got about 2 questions. How many people on your staff?
Thanks so much. It's actually great. It's just me.
Oh my
I'm
God.
yeah, so I'm doing it all this year. Europe, it can be low budget. So I had an assistant coach at the start of the year in the club, basically financial problems. So I've been doing it all. And
How many teams do you
yeah,
coach?
I have one team. So I
Oh,
have 15 players who I work with every day, Monday to Friday. And I do all their player development too. And I do a lot of the strength and conditioning too.
it's great.
So
It's great
thank
stuff.
you.
I really
I
enjoyed it.
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
it's fascinating. You're
Thank
a
you so
genius.
much.
You're a genius.
No, I really liked what you said about the growth mindset at the start, because for me, that book changed my whole life. And I read it when I was pretty young. And it's like, that's kind of what led to this, what I presented.
Okay.
And I
Now,
think like, yeah.
yeah, now maybe I missed it now. So do you have a book of all your slides or
I'm actually writing a book right now. I don't know how long it will be till it's
okay.
ready.
Uh-huh.
I think I'm about halfway through it.
Okay, that's great.
But I do have a website where I have a lot of the ideas and things for coaches to look at.
Okay, that's awesome.
Thanks so much, Colleen.
Now, Alex, is everything that you do under the umbrella of basketball immersion with Coach Oliver? Okay.
Exactly. So, it's for me, it's being able to share these ideas through immersion is incredible. So we have a membership community, which I'm sure a lot of coaches are familiar with. So basically every week I share, like me or Chris, we share a new small-sided game or a new concept. So we have that, and then we have the BDT offense, which is basically it's like 25 online courses for coaches to build a conceptual offense from scratch, released through basketball immersion. The BDT offense is the name of it. Yeah.
And that's where you're kind of the quarterback of the BDT offense,
Exactly.
and you walk coaches through.
Exactly. So it's really exciting. I think we've got about 200 high school coaches on it now. I think, I've had like NBA and NCAA coaches show a lot of interest in this. So I'm really just waiting for the first programs to jump on it, because I think it's, when these things start happening, it will be really exciting to see, kind of the results that happen through doing this.
Well, I like how you mentioned on player development that you don't have just the guards and just the posts and just the forwards, because in reality, I mean, they're all playing on the floor at the same time. So that makes perfect sense. Yeah. And
exactly.
You don't really give your players a playbook with the diagrams, but did you give them scouting reports or,
Okay, that's a great question, Colleen. So basically, you know what, can I just share my screen really quickly? Because I can share what I'd give them. So I think the biggest thing, and this is something I learned last year, it's called cognitive load theory. And it's basically how much information can the human brain actually absorb and remember. And this is basically what it looks like. So you can see here, we've got working memory on the left, long-term memory on the right. And the working memory is basically any new information we give players, such as in the scout report. And I think the thing is the capacity of the working memory to absorb new information is really small. And a lot of the time, I think with scout reports, we overload the working memory and then none of it is retained, especially, and the most important things aren't retained.
Right.
And it doesn't go through to the long-term memory. So with how I do the scout would be, I wouldn't actually give them like lots of printed out pages. I'd give them a one pager to start with. Okay. And it would look like this. So it's really just color coded, really, really simple, really simple. But the idea is that I'd use quizzes during the week, like video quizzes and things to make it fun so that they're learning every single day, as opposed to just giving them the report one day and saying, here, learn this. Mm-hmm. So I'd kind of embed it during the whole week, if that makes sense. So for instance, in particular small-sided games, maybe we'd say, let's say we've got this guy, K, who is, we're playing against, he's a 40% three-point shooter. So I'd be like, okay, guys, in this next small-sided game, I'd put a bib on a player and say, you are Nick K. And I'd say something like, every 3-pointer that you score is worth double. So I want to see if they remember from the scout report what our coverage on him is going to be. Maybe we have a non-shooter. Okay, this guy here. So again, when we're playing against non-shooters, we don't guard them. We call it mark. So like the guys like they're marked. So we just literally guard off them in a drop coverage. We don't even go near them. So again, it's like I'll be like, okay, this player is, you are gonna wear a bib. You're gonna be representing him. I want to see, can they remember what our coverage is against that player? So the whole idea is I build it in the week gradually. So when it comes time to the game, it's ingrained in their brains as opposed to, reading out like a 15-page document. And I love the detail that goes into the scout reports. I think just my biggest thing with it is like it takes players away from actually executing their game model properly because it's so much information. Really good question.
Do you only play one game a week?
Yes.
Okay, so
yes.
that would be the difference between us because most of us play 2 games a week.
Great question. So 2 games a week, no problem. You basically just adapt the cycle a little bit. So there's actually, what I'd recommend checking out is Fergus Connolly. He has some good work. He's a sports scientist and he came up with this morpho cycle. You can adapt it even in the NBA where they're playing like 4 games a week. Sometimes you can use it. So that's a great question, Devontae. And yeah, you can absolutely do it for 2 games a week. No problem.
What was that guy's name again?
Sorry, let me write it in the chat.
Okay.
Great, done.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
And Alex, I've got a quick question. When you're in a practice setting and mistakes start happening, how do you pause for an intervention and how does that back and forth go?
Great question, Matthew. So I think obviously the messiness will happen because they're going through the process of learning. They will make mistakes, especially early on. So I think I'd use interventions, and Chris at Immersion, we used exactly the same ones. So we basically have trigger words, things like hold, which basically means pause, recreate, so rewind the situation. And what I would tend to do is not give explicit feedback and give the players the answers, because again, I want them to remember it. And if I tell them it, they're not likely to, come up with that solution themselves. Or maybe I'm taking them away from a better solution, which works for them. So I would typically just use some prompts and ask them things like, what are you seeing here? What did you see? What did you perceive? What did the defense do? Can you think or show me one potential solution that you could have done instead? So that's a great question. I think it's, so I'm very, as opposed to me instructing, it's more, obviously I'm using some questions, but I'm really trying to get them to think. And then I'm big on film too, Matthew, huge on film. So like every player, if I had a video coordinator, I'd have every player try and get like 3 or 4 clips after practice on WhatsApp. And we're just like send them those videos and just be like, what are you seeing here? Give me your thoughts on what you saw, or what could you have done here instead? I think that like individual film can be amazing. I actually prefer individual film to team film because players can do it in their own time. And it's like, they're not in team film sessions. Obviously, they're not obviously sometimes thinking for themselves because it's either the coach giving the answer or another player if the coach is asking the players questions. Whereas with individual, everyone has to answer it. So for instance, if I am doing a team film session, I'll hold it and the players bring their notebooks to every film session we do. And I'll say, okay, I want you to write down what you see here and what potential solutions could be. So they all have to think, and then we debrief after a minute. So they're all at least doing the question, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Did it take?
You're a busy guy. Sorry to interrupt there. You're a busy guy being on your own then this year, doing all the video and trying to do everything yourself.
Yeah, it's been insane, honestly, Matthew. But it's like, I think it's good because for my future coaching career, it's prepared me, I think, for a lot. And I love living in Italy. but and I've enjoyed it, but it's like, yeah, it's been a heavy workload for sure. Yeah.
I have a quick question. By the way, I love how you went in depth about the memory, and I remember we had a conversation about a year ago about but anyway, my question is, I've known what you do for a very long time, but I never asked, who are some of your professional influences who influence you to have all these kinds of advanced thinking on basketball? I gotta know your influences.
I actually looked, okay, so within basketball, Chris Oliver from Immersion, you know, is someone I looked up to. And I'd say a guy called Mike McKay at Basketball Canada. But actually, Henry, a lot of my inspiration came from outside basketball. So, you know, I was really looking at, I've got all the kind of like sports science papers. And I think this is actually something interesting for you guys as college coaches. Every university, you guys will most likely have an amazing professor in skill acquisition and motor learning. So it's like, for me, I would tap into those people straight away because they will have some really, really interesting ideas, which you can implement with your coaching. So for me, it's like I spent a lot of time, Henry, actually reading the science and reading like the papers that these professors are producing. And that's when I was realizing that, you know, kind of how I was coaching basketball previously did not align with the evidence base. So it was actually outside there, then looking at other sports. And I mean, I learned from everywhere, really, Henry. So it's like, you know, every coach, I try and pick something and take something from, and then just incorporate it into the things I'm doing.
Great.
I have a quick question. Thank you for all your time, and it's great material. Looking forward to digesting it a little bit. But
thank you.
Yeah. Are all your players students of the game and they know basketball, or do you start with students or players that you got to teach them?
Great point. Or I've got to start teaching them and actually getting them to really be interested in it. Because for me, it's like, I mean, they've come on so far, but it's like none of my players watched basketball properly before they got to me this year. And it's like, this is the curse of Instagram. And it's like, what they see is not representative of the game. And this is why we have this problem right now with the stuff all these skills trainers are doing. They're training all these one-on-one moves, like finishing mid-range moves. And that's not what happens most of the time in a basketball game. It's just not, right? And then players see like the top % of NBA players or WNBA players doing these moves, and they think that's what basketball is. But it's like, the reality is there are only so many Steph Curry, James Harden, LeBrons of the world. And 98% of players obviously have to run these team actions, these triggers to create advantages. So basically what I spent a lot of time doing with them was watching some games with them. And I found it was different. It was impossible to find a team that played like how I envisioned us to play, but we got a lot of different things from everywhere. And I'd say, okay, I want you to focus on the transition defense of this team, because maybe that's, you know, there's some things we're going to do there, and maybe the half-court offense of this team. And I'd use a lot of quizzes and things like that to really build their knowledge. So I would do, for instance, with the glossary, I would do, especially early on in the season, I'd do things like a Kahoot quiz, which is interactive, and a printed out worksheet quiz, and really get them looking at that. And then I would also give specific players, I'd find some games on the FIBA YouTube channel, like international games, and I'd ask them to watch it, and I'd give them like a list of questions to answer, so I know they did it. And I think it's really interesting, because it's like, I think through this approach, what I've really seen personally since September is, I'd say 90% of the players have taken a genuine interest in basketball and watching games. And they're really, like, some of the language they use, I've got a bunch of clips on my Twitter going back. So unfortunately, it's a long scroll because I share quite a bit and some of these clips are old, but it's really cool just to see some of the things the players are talking about and like their knowledge and their terminology. And I think that it definitely does not start like that. It took a lot of time. If you guys are cool, I'll just share a quick clip actually on that. But it's like something I do a lot is I allow them to debrief and to actually talk about it. So a lot of the times when we're in practices, in small-sided games and scrimmages, each team will have one timeout or two timeouts to call, and they run it. So it's completely player-led, and I don't say anything. So they basically have to learn how to communicate with each other. This would be an example where it's not really me talking, and I'm kind of creating that environment where the players can, share and demonstrate their knowledge. I'll just play this quickly. It's 18 seconds. I think it's about a defensive coverage.
On the verbals, on the picks, if you want to call out switch, don't call it out before it happens, because if your guys can't manage to cancel the screen, there's no switch. So
Excellent.
Call the switch. The switch we call late, but everything else we call early.
Hell of a job.
So that guy, he's 16 years old, and he was talking about really impressive. We try and basically cancel picks where we fight over it and we don't get taken out by the pick. We call it a cancel. And obviously, if that happens, we don't need to switch it because we just cancel the pick. So I really try and create these situations in the practice where they are using their knowledge, giving feedback, etc. I hope that answers it a little bit, Karen.
Other questions for Coach? Yes, Alex, it sounds a lot. I know on Chris Oliver's The Basketball Podcast, one of the early guests was Mark Bennett. And it sounds like he's been an influence on you, right?
I worked for Mark when I was 16, growing up in England.
Okay, just phenomenal stuff. And I can tell you've taken a lot of his concepts. And he talked a lot about the All Blacks, how they can make adjustments on the fly, and it's the hardest team to coach against, right? Teams that can do it all on the fly. They make adjustments on their own, and they don't have to rubberneck over to coach.
Exactly. They're the most dominant sports team in the world. I've studied them a lot. Like I read they've got some great books about the All Blacks out. There's a Amazon All Access documentary, which is amazing. And it's really good.
What team is that?
The All Blacks rugby team in New Zealand, the national team of New Zealand.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm not a rugby guy, but I don't know anything really about the game, but the whole kind of culture and everything and the environment, it's incredible.
Hey, Alex, I had a question. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Oh, great. I had a few migrations. I'm from New Zealand, so it's awesome that you guys are talking about the All Blacks.
Love it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so my question is in regards to player development locations. So I'm a player development myself. Obviously, you travel the world, just like a little bit like me. And for myself, also, last week I attended a player development conference with one of your colleagues, Jorik.
Sure.
Joe, yeah. And also, a few nice coaches were there, like Phil Handy. I asked them a question in regards to the best player development countries that you would just throw a kid in. Obviously Jorik said, Canada, Australia, where Phil Handy would say Europe because of, just like what you just told everyone, the nurturing of everything. But in my experience that I've been through all these countries, I don't see another country that implements so much passion and has such a big culture compared to the United States. These kids are just, they have like love of the game embedded in them, where, coming from New Zealand, Australia, we don't really see that. We don't see like a gym full of, players just, hungry and stuff. So what would be your opinion? And
very interesting question. And I think it's like, for me, the thing is, I think it's a lot of coaches talk about countries of excellence. And like you say, and for me, I really think I think it's impossible to stereotype, because, I'm from England and there is not very few basketball here whatsoever. But I think anyone, if they're really willing to work hard, have a growth mindset, you can create a pocket of excellence wherever you are in the world, literally anywhere. And I think like for me, it's especially, I hear a lot of people kind of talking about in Europe, like, oh, European basketball is so good, or this and that. And for me, I get really frustrated being here because I think it's archaic with how the clubs treat their employees, the traditional coaching. So I think it's, for me, it's like trying to learn from the best people you can find anywhere they are in the world. But I like to kind of encourage coaches to be like, you know, you're not confined based on where you're from. You know, you could, like, if you're really ready to work, put the work and do the research, you know, it doesn't matter where you are. And I think, you know, what I like about the US, and it's like, that's why I want to coach in the US eventually, is because there's just such a culture of basketball. And it's, you know, look at things like March Madness. I mean, it's impossible to get anything even close to that in Europe. Just the level of facilities, like how much basketball is on TV. Whereas, you know, in growing up from where I'm from in England, like most people would not know what basketball is, right? Let alone they wouldn't know what the NBA, WNBA, what March Madness is. So that's what I like the most about US basketball, for sure.
Are there also any specific teams that replicate your style of play that we should watch?
New Zealand national team, your men's team with Ross McMains. He's really good. Then I would say, no, I'd say them. I'm not sure really of any others.
Any other questions for Coach before we? By the way, it is. Tell us what time it is in where you are. Alex.
It's okay. It's actually 2:30, so it's not too bad. AM.
So
Thank you very much, Alex.
We're keeping them up late, but man, this is just
That was great.
Unbelievable stuff.
Yeah.
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate all the questions. Thanks so much, everyone, for being so open-minded onto this stuff, because it's not, you know, it's not an easy topic. So I'm very grateful for that. And, you know, I'm actually going to be in the US for 2 months in June and July, doing a few clinics here and there. So obviously, you know, if I'm in the same location, it'd be great to connect with any of you guys.
Will be in the East Coast? Or
I will be. I will be. Chicago, Ohio, I think Boston. I've got to look at the schedule.
Yeah. What about New York, New Jersey?
Not confirmed yet, but if I can get a clinic there, I'd come for sure.
All right.
That was great.
And these are all with basketball immersion?
Exactly.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, man.
That was great.
Well, definitely
travel with Coach Chris Oliver, or just you alone?
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks again, Alex.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Appreciate you coming
Thanks
on.
so
I'll
much,
stop the recording now.
Much appreciated.
Thanks for staying up so late.
Of course. No, it's all good.